mostly white in the cars or very dark, but I think we can go for a more wider color. So let's just bring this up, desaturate it a lot more so it's pretty much gray, and I think this should be just fine. Something like that maybe. And for now we can work with that. So the next thing which I want to work on is the rims. I think they should be more white. It should be more like a bright chrome, and currently it's very metally and it's a bit alloy-ish. So let's just make this a bit darker. So I'm selecting the rim, oh sorry, a bit lighter. So and I'm just boosting our color, and we should see we get a lot wider response for the rim. And I think this kind of works a lot better. The next thing is, let's just try to play up the car paint. As I said in the beginning of this video, I want it to be more like a kind of a blue. So currently it's very white. So I just want to play, sorry, it's very gray. So I just want to make it a bit more blue. So selecting that, going to the car paint shader, framing that guy up, and then I'll just be adding a bit more blue to the whole specular color. So currently, as I said, it's kind of a gray tint, gray color. So let's just rotate it to be more blue and bring in the saturation to be blue. There we go. So now let's just boost this up a bit. And you can see now slowly we introduce a blue color. It's a very subtle effect, but it's definitely going somewhere. You can see on the hood it's more blue. And I think the overall effect is already helping quite a bit. It's not as monochrome. There's like a kind of a gray blue color, and I think this helps quite a bit. I just want to make it a bit lighter. I think it's a bit too dark, so let's just boost up the diffuse a bit more. So you can see when I boost the diffuse overall, it gets also brighter because the base component is kind of a white color now. We can also really subtly tint this to be a blue as well. You can see what this brings us. It gets overall too blue, but you can see the effect. So let's just use a lower saturation of 0.5 maybe, just to get a tint of blue in our base color. Maybe a bit more. And also we can try to boost up the flakes a bit so they get a bit more pop to them. So let's just boost them up to maybe 0.6 or 0.65. So they should also get a bit brighter. We get more speck everywhere. And also we can just try to make the color of the speck also a bit brighter. It's currently on 0.4, so go up to 0.5. And let's just render and see where we're at now. All right, I think we're slowly getting somewhere. You can see now it almost looks like a proper commercial render for a car. A few things which we can adjust. I think the code reflection is a bit too strong. It's too crisp. So I like just to play it up maybe by 0.1. So it's 0.01, and we can see now there's a slight glossiness to it, which gives us a nicer sheen on the code itself. And I still think that the interior is a bit too saturated. So let's just bring this down some more by just going saturation and maybe try 0.5 instead. So now it's almost gray again, so we can just bring it in a bit more. So as you can see, this is a trial and error thing. You try colors which you like and you just adjust them to your needs. So the next thing is, let's just adjust this guy. I think this is way too diffuse. It looks almost like a Lambert shader. So let's just make this a bit more shiny by reducing the roughness to maybe 0.3. So now we get a bit nicer edge here and it looks a bit more metallic. Also, the inside here is currently still a gray shader, and this should be actually very black. So let's just change the color to be I think 1% black, 0.01, and bring in a bit reflection of like just a speck, just make it a bit rougher, maybe 0.4, and this should be the interior. It might be a bit too dark, so maybe just bring it up to 0.02, just that there is maybe something more to see. So what else would you do? Let's render and see where we're at. So now we can see that the render, it looks definitely a lot better with the softer reflections and also with the interior. So it gets really somewhere now. So the next thing is to break up the shaders a bit. So the first thing I want to do is start with the car paint to just add a really slight amount of bumpiness to the whole car paint itself. So I'm just framing the shader for the car paint. And what I'm doing now is I'm just creating an AI noise pattern, and I'll be using this to control a bump map for the code itself. So let's just create an AI bump shader and connect the out color to the bump map. Oops, to the red to the bump map, and connect this guy to the, let's just open up the shader. Let's just say show all and connect the out value towards the code normal. And let's just render the selection here and see what we get. So from the get-go, we don't really see much happening. So I'd just like to isolate selected and see what the bump node is actually doing. So by selecting that, isolate selected, we can see the bump is super tiny, so we definitely need to make it larger. I just want to create a bigger surface modulation, so there's some big bumps going on. So let's just try 10% of this. And I think this might be a bit too small still, so let's just go smaller by having that as well. So this might actually do the trick. And if I go back to my shader, to my rendered version, and I'll just boost up our bump height, which is on 0 currently. Let's just go up to maybe 0.1. Let's just try 0.5. And now you can see just by doing that, we get definitely some breakup on the top here, and especially this line here, which has been super straight before, is now really bendy. Let's just render this out, and you can see now what's going on. It's very strong, but you can see that there's like really bumps going on here. It's way too strong as it is, so we need to dial it down. But the overall effect, I think, is very successful. So maybe let's just go to 0.15. And even though it's not really visible, we kind of feel there's something going on. And if I just for now just have a code roughness of 0, you can now see that this line is pretty bumpy. And even if I play up the bump again to 0.5, you can really see what's happening. So 0.05. So first of all, on 0, this is what you see. So there's a pretty straight line here. And if I slowly bring it in, you can see the distortion happening. So let's just do something really subtle. Just that this straight line here is not that straight anymore. And I think this might do it. Let's just check the hood. You can see overall it's a bit more bumpy. So let's just bring back the roughness to 0.01. And this should do this. And the next thing is I want to work with the tires a bit. So if I frame that selection right here, currently it's pretty simple. It's a simple black shader. So what I want to do, I just want to connect some modulation towards the edges just to play around with the roughness a bit. So if I use a curvature node and I just plug it in just to visualize it quickly into the ID slots, and I do isolate selection, we can see that we get a very tight radius. So let's just boost this up maybe to 0.5, maybe go to 2. So something like that should help. And because I just wanted something on the edges here, so we can even try 3 and just boost, increase the samples to maybe 6. So it's a bit more detailed. Maybe a value of 2 is better. And just play around with the spread, just to clamp it a bit. And I think if we use this as a mask, we should get something very interesting. All right, so what I mean by that is I just create a AI color correct node, and I will be choosing a input color of our current roughness value, which is a value of 0.45. So I'm just creating a gray color of 0.45 as our starting point. And then from the curvature, I'm just selecting the red channel as a mask for the color correction, which plugs then into our roughness by connecting the out red to our specular roughness. So from the get-go, we should not see any difference because we did not change any values. And currently the curvature has a value ranging, let's see if we can actually see it. So it goes up to 0.3. So we can try to boost it up by a factor of 2. So now we have some stronger values here. And ideally we clamp it because now it's going over 1. So what you can do is create an AI clamp, or you can connect a range, but I like to use a clamp for this. And just reconnect the output red to the mask. So now these values don't go higher than 1, or they are not supposed to go higher than 1. So they are clamped exactly below 1 or below. Okay, so if I look at the color correct node, if I now want to make these edges a bit more shiny, what I need to do is just make a negative exposure. And then you can see we get more detail in the tires. So these areas are a bit more specky now. Let's see how that looks. It's not that visible actually, but we definitely add some breakup. And if this is not enough, we can go to the curvature node and definitely play around some more in this. So let's just play around with the spread to just keep it on 1 and increase the radius maybe. And now play around with some thresholding, just to shift the edge a bit. So lots of different things we can do here. So now by playing around with the threshold, we get a better breakup, and you can see that this is very shiny, and then we get rougher parts. And this is exactly what I was going for, something to just have a bit more randomization. The next thing is we can use occlusion, AI ambient occlusion, or well, let's just see, we can use that, but I just thought of we can use a curvature again, but this time just invert the modes. Let's just see how that would look first by connecting it up to the ID slot again. And just isolate selected, and this time convex to concave. So now it's from the inside. If I play up the radius now, we only get the inside of the tracks, which is also very interesting because what we can do now, we can darken this to like kind of a mud or something similar like that to get an interesting edge there. So let's just do that. So currently we have a base color of pretty much black. So what we can do now, we can use the same idea, but just this time we connect it to a base color. So currently we have a value of 0.01. So if I create another AI color correct node and do the same black color of 0.1, what I can do now is use the same values as a mask, and this time change our color. So now it's 0.1, and if I just change this to be like additive, you can now see we get some color in here. And let's just try to make something more like a mud, like a dirt color, something more in the orange tones, and definitely play down the color. Something like this. And now you can subtly see that there's something going on in the tire. It's not perfectly black. And this is exactly what I wanted to do. So there's something really subtle about the tires, which just breaks up the overall color. And we can actually darken the base some more, like that, just to give a bit more contrast to the whole thing. So even just this tiny bit, so adding curvatures for some dirt and some speck breakup just adds a lot more realism to the tire. Let's see the back tire, and you can see there's something going on. There's something in the ridges, and it just looks a lot better. If you think that the roughness is too shiny, you can just go to the color correct node and just play with the base color, make this a bit brighter, so the overall roughness gets overall more rough. And then based on the mask, we have still some dark spots everywhere, like this. So this is essentially what we are doing. We're just reducing the specularity on these edges, and I think this was a very successful presentation of that. So let's just render and see what we get. All right, I really like what we have right now. So the next thing what I like to see is just an overall a bit dirtiness to the car. So currently it's super clean, there's no dirt, nothing. So what I want to do, I want to create an occlusion shader which applies a dust shader on top of the car itself. So let's just first create a shader which is our dust shader. So let's just create a simple standard surface shader. Instead of just assigning it to everything, what I want to do now is just for now assign this to the car paint. So now I have the standard surface here and I have my car paint shader on the top. So what I want to do now, I just want to for now plug it into the shading engine of the car paint. Let's just reconnect this guy up. Let's just render the selection right here and just connect this to this guy there. And you can see now the bottom is being adjusted, and we can do this for all the other parts as well. So now the top is changing, and now the overall car paint should get this same shader. So this is now our dust shader. Currently nothing special to this. So let's just roughen this guy up and make this look like a kind of like a, we will add some noises. So AI noise, and we will be using this guy in the out color, base color. So this is a very high frequency noise. So let's just play down the scale to 05, 0.05, 0.05, and maybe add some detail to this. And first let's change our specularity to be very rough, maybe something 0.6. And our color is diffuse roughness is 0.8. And specularity is fine, weight to 1. So now let's just play around with the colors quickly by just adjusting our noise colors to a brown maybe, and the other one is a similar brown, which we will then shift into a different color space. So a bit desaturated, a bit lighter, and let's just do the same for the other one as well. And just make this darker. So as you can see, the shader is now overall just a spotty, it kind of looks like a muddy feel to it. So what we want to do now is we want to mix this in using an occlusion. So the next step would be to create a mix shader node. And now, as you can see, the more stuff we do to this, the more complex the whole thing gets. So let's just move these shading engines to the side. And the next thing is to create an AI mix shader node. And then we connect the car paint to shader 1 and the out color of our dust shader to shader 2. And then just reconnecting the shading engine to with the mix shader node instead. So you can see now what's going on is we're getting the like a blend between the dust and the car paint. All right, but we don't want to blend it by 50% as it is on default. We want to control this using a occlusion. So for now, I just change it to 0, which means that our shader 1 is fully active. And the only thing we got to do now is create an AI ambient occlusion node, which will be driving our mix. All right, so before we continue, let's just create a range shader just to have more control about the occlusion. Connect up the out color to the input and connect the output red to the mix shader input. And then let's just do isolate selected on the occlusion and see what we get. Let's just see if we can get something. So now we can see we definitely have something in the occlusion. So let's just play down the far clip to maybe 5, and let's see what else we can do. We can do self only. So only the assigned shader objects get the occlusion. And definitely we need to play up more the amount of everything. It's very subtle. So let's just go into the range. And first of all, see if we can invert this by flipping output min and output max to 1 and 0. So now we have an inverted occlusion. So whatever is white is occluded, right? So now we can just play around with our range values just to clamp these guys up to just get something more interesting. Something like that. This should actually stay on 1. We can just boost the input min so we get an overall brighter color. So whatever is in here gets really muddy or dirty, and then we should just overall play with the values which we need. So if I just see what values we have, this will blend in the dust by a really low value of 0.2. This would be a value of 0.9 almost. So we should definitely clamp our output to something more reasonable. So let's just maybe clamp it to 0.4. Let's just do maybe 0.6 and then just see what we get. So if I bring up the input min some more, we get a pretty white matte, and this is driving the mix. So let's see what we get now. So on top of this, we should now see the dust being applied to on the top here. So it's hardly visible, but you can see there's something going on. And if I play around with our output min to back to 1, you can see now that this is definitely dirtying it up, and we see some stuff going on here, especially in the handles. They get super dirty now and broken up. So what we should be doing now is we can add a bit more detail to this, so it's not that the mask is not that simple. So that's another thing which helps to break up everything. Before we do that, let's just reduce the output min to maybe 0.8, 0.5, something that is not like this is now off. You can see there's no dust, and a value of 0.6, it's getting a bit dirty over there. So the next thing is, let's just try to break up the occlusion with a noise pattern. All right, and we do that by just connecting a noise to the occlusion inputs. So AI noise, they just go into our color. So our white gets a noise pattern. Let's just see if I isolate this. This is our white currently. It's way too small again. So just go 0.05 and maybe add more detail, maybe add some distortion to this. And let's see what this looks like now. This is that, and let's see the range. So now we get these little spots everywhere. It's definitely a bit too much, so we can just make this overall a bit brighter. See what this gets us now. It's maybe still too bright. All right, so slowly, if I just we want to have something which is very dark, so it's just a bit less broken up. So I'm just locking my selection to the range node, and I'm just driving the noise to be a bit more brighter, so there's a little bit more breakup to this. All right, so now you can see everywhere where there's white, there will be dust, and these little splotches is just an overall breakup. It might be too much for if you want to have a super clean car, but I think this should do it actually. So let's just see what we get if I render this section here. And you can see there's something going on in these ridges here, something there. It's very subtle, but I think it does help quite a bit. And another thing is, currently it's only on the car paint. So what I want to do is I want to assign the same thing towards the plastics over there as well. So let's just select these guys, frame the shaders, and let's see what else. I think for now, this is selecting pretty much everything I wanted. So let's just also connect the mix shader to these guys as well. So what I would just need to do is create a mix shader like this, delete the shading engine, and then just hook up the dust shader as well. First of all, out color goes to these surface shaders like this. And then shader 1 gets our rubber, and then shader 2 would be our dust. Let's just add this guy right here and then connect it towards shader 2. And then the next thing would be to connect the range to the mix of shader of the mix shader. So now you can see just by doing that, we actually add lots of dust to our plastic, and you can see how it looks. I think it does help a lot. It's definitely way too much. So what we can do now is, because we have it on the plastics as well, we have an overall feel how big the occlusion amount is, and we can play around in the range to adjust it to our needs. So I think something more like this is a bit more interesting. We get it still in the edges, but then it's more there. Let's see what this looks like. It's very subtle, but I think it's adding a lot more to this. So I think we are good to go. So let's just render and see what we get now. Yeah, I think this works pretty good. You can see the dust is collecting here in these little pockets in the front. You can see it here on the edge. And I think overall it looks very presentable right now. So one last thing what I want to do is work on this plastic here on the front. It should be a bit more rough, and it should be a bit lighter, and we can also add a bit of breakup to this thing. So currently this is our mix shader with the dust, so we will just be focusing on the rubber body here. And as I said, I want this part to be a bit more shiny. So first of all, let's bring up the roughness a bit down, like that, and also boost up our color just a bit lighter. I think this looks a bit nicer, and we can also try to, instead of using it as a plastic, we can also just quickly try to make it a metal and roughen this up a bit more, just to see if this will look better. It kind of looks like a carbon shader now, which might just work as well. I think this is maybe going a bit too bright, so let's just roughen this up some more and reduce our overall color. Maybe reduce roughness a bit. So I think what I wanted to see something more, which looks a bit more solid than just a simple plastic, and I think this is actually doing it. What we can try to add a code and just roughen this up as well. Maybe go 0.5, 0.3. I'm just testing something out quickly just to see if we can make this body material a bit more interesting. I think it's maybe just going a bit over the top now with the code as well. Maybe a 0.2 value. No, I think we should maybe not do this. It was just a test, so I think this is not really working. I think something like this is a lot better. But then again, we can just keep it as a plastic and just make it darker, and then we have the kind of the same result. Boosting up this a bit, and we should be just good. It's now a plastic, and we kind of have the same result, as you can see. So the next thing what I want to do is just break up this material. And to do that, I just want to render in 100% resolution, so we have a bit more detail to play with. Alright, so now let's try to add some more detail to this. So what I want to do now is create an AI noise again, and this time instead of using a bump, let's just use a normal. So I'm changing the mode to be a vector, and I'm creating an AI normal map, and the out color of my noise goes into the input of the normal, and the out value goes into my normal camera. So on default you see it's a very strong effect. So let's just play down the strength of the normal map to maybe 0.05, and you can see there's some modulation going on. So if I isolate the noise map, you can see what we get. We want a bit more detail, so let's just go maybe up to 5 in the frequency for X, Y, and Z, which might be a bit much, so maybe 3 instead. And we can increase the octaves, and let's maybe see what this brings us. So now with this change, you can see there is some subtle breakup going on here, which is a very interesting effect, and I think this helps quite a lot. You can play up the intensity if you need to, but I think what we have is good. We can see though with some higher values, I think this is a bit too much. So let's just go back to 0.05 and be done with that change. Alright, so I played out the render settings a bit and I think we have a pretty successful render. It looks very nice, the car looks very high quality, especially the front, the chrome looks nice and shiny. We have our little breakups in the ridges here, our tires have these nice spec sheens. And overall, I think it's a very successful render. I think I played up the depth of field a bit too much for this specific render. But all in all, it's very cool. We see nice flakes. The only thing which I would spend some more time on is the interior. It's currently very basic. But for this kind of lecture, I think I showed most of the tricks I am using, how to break up your shaders and how to make them more interesting. So in the next lecture, I will be showing you a few more things about lighting and how to create our own light rig for this specific scene, which is a car automotive render. So thanks for watching this lecture on complex materials, and I hope I could show you how to kind of set up shaders for a realistic car render.